to make it this far, brave ninja. Face me.
Bring it. If you grew up on the old Ninja Gaiden games, you already know the feeling I'm talking about. Ninja Gaiden wasn't just a hard game, it was a specific kind of hard. Fast, aggressive, and brutally honest. You didn't win because you found a cheesy build, you won because you learned patterns, you controlled space, and you got sharper. So when Ninja Gaiden 4 finally arrived, I went in with a very specific expectation. Not just give me a good action game, but give me that classic Ninja Gaiden identity again. And naturally, I assumed something else because the cover, the vibe, and a lot of the marketing energy made it feel like Ryu Hayabusa was going to be a major part of the experience. But here's the honest reality 3 months after the release. Ninja Gaiden 4 is a solid return to classic-style Ninja Gaiden combat. But it's primarily a Yakumo's game, the new protagonist. Ryu is in it, he matters, but if you're expecting a full Ryu-led adventure from start to finish, you're going to feel that gap. And I want to say that up front because the single expectation mismatch is the biggest thing that can decide whether you love this game immediately or spend the first hours thinking, wait, where's the game I thought I was buying? Now, here's the important part. That doesn't make Ninja Gaiden 4 bad. In fact, the reason this conversation matters is because the game underneath that expectation issue is genuinely fun. It delivers what a lot of people wanted from a modern Ninja Gaiden game. Sharp hack-and-slash action, satisfying combat flow, and that classic loop where you feel yourself improving because the game demands it. So in this review, I'm doing two things at the same time. First, I'm judging Ninja Gaiden 4 as an action game. Does it deliver the combat, pacing, and challenge that makes the series special? And second, I'm giving you the buying clarity I wish I had. What to expect from Yakumo as the protagonist, how Ryu fits in, and who this game is actually for in 2026. Series veterans, newcomers, or people who just want a top-tier action game with no patience for filler. Alright, with that said, let's start with what Ninja Gaiden 4 gets right, because if you're here for combat, this game knows exactly what it's doing. The best compliment I can give Ninja Gaiden 4 is this. The game understands that Ninja Gaiden combat is supposed to feel dangerous. A lot of modern action games are built around letting you feel powerful first, and then gradually layering in the difficulty. Ninja Gaiden has always done the opposite. It gives you the speed, it gives you the tools, but it constantly reminds you that you are one mistake away from getting punished. And Ninja Gaiden 4 brings that back. The pace is fast, encounters don't feel like you're politely trading hits with enemies who wait their turn. It feels like the game wants to overwhelm you, and your job is to stay calm inside that pressure. That pressure creates the Ninja Gaiden loop. You don't win by getting lucky, you win by learning the rhythm. You start reading enemy behavior, you stop overcommitting, you learn when to be aggressive and when to reset, and you gradually become more efficient. That's what I wanted from a modern Ninja Gaiden. And in terms of pure moment-to-moment combat, the game delivers. There's a satisfying sharpness to the flow. The way you can chain attacks, reposition, and keep momentum without the combat turning into button mashing. It feels like the game is built for players who want to improve, not just players who want to finish the game as fast as possible. And this is where it hits that classic experience, because even though the visuals and presentations are modern, the spirit is old school. The game rewards discipline. You can't just throw yourself into groups and expect to win. You have to pick targets, control space, and avoid getting surrounded. It's the kind of combat where you can feel your brain working while your hands are moving. You're constantly adjusting. Now, I'm not going to pretend it's perfect for everyone, because this style has a cost. If you want an action game that lets you chill and feel unstoppable, Ninja Gaiden 4 isn't really that. The fun comes from being under pressure and slowly earning control over it. But if you like hack-and-slash action where the game respects you enough to punish sloppy play, this is exactly the kind of design that people have been missing. And that's why, even with the protagonist expectation issue, I still call the game solid, because the combat foundation is the real product here. It's what you'll spend most of your time doing, and it's what makes you come back from one more attempt even after a rough fight. Next, we need to talk about progression and structure. because I expected meaningful progression for both Yakumo and Ryu. And what the game actually does there is part of why some longtime fans feel misled, even if the game itself is enjoyable. One of the reasons the protagonist expectation matters so much is because it changes what you assume the progression is going to be. If you go into Ninja Gaiden 4 thinking this is a Ryu-led comeback, you naturally expect a certain rhythm. Ryu's toolkit expanding, his progression driving the experience, and the story structure that keeps him central from beginning to end. But Ninja Gaiden 4 doesn't really build itself around that assumption. The game structure makes it clear pretty quickly that Yakumo is the main lens you're playing through, and the progression you feel the most is tied with him. That's not inherently a problem, it's just a reality you need to know up front, because it changes how you interpret everything you're doing. Now, the good news is, the progression supports the gameplay loop. It's not just numbers go up. You do feel like you're learning the combat, unlocking options and shaping how you approach encounters. And in a game like Ninja Gaiden, that matters because pure difficulty without growth can start to feel exhausting. The pacing also fits the series. You're not spending hours doing filler activities. You're moving through combat, pressure, and set-piece moments that are built to test you. The game wants you in the fight. But here's where the disappointed makes sense. If you're expected meaningful ongoing progression for both Yakumo and Ryu, as if you're going to be building two major characters side by side, the game doesn't deliver that in the way the marketing vibe might have suggested. Ryu's presence isn't the spine of the whole experience. It's not the main journey you're constantly living with. It feels more like the game is keeping him reserved for specific moments rather than building the entire structure around him. And because of that, when Ryu appears later, especially if it's only for a limited stretch, it can feel like the game is teasing a version of Ninja Gaiden 4 that you assumed was the default. Now, this is important. I'm not saying the game has no respect for Ryu, I'm saying it uses him differently than many fans expected. So if you're watching this and you're a long-time Ninja Gaiden fan, here's the practical guidance. If what you want is the return of Ninja Gaiden combat, the structure supports that. The pacing is built for action, the flow keeps you moving, and the game doesn't waste your time. But if what you want is Ryu as a main character or even a secondary character, you're going to fill that gap, because the game isn't centered on him the way you might assume from the cover and the general marketing strategy. And this is where the conversation becomes fair and useful, because we can separate two different questions. Is Ninja Gaiden 4 a solid action game that delivers classic Ninja Gaiden combat? And the answer would be yes. Is Ninja Gaiden 4 the Ryu-led comeback that some marketing impressions might have suggested? Not really, or at least not in the way many fans hoped. Next, I want to talk about that expectation gap directly. Not as a drama, but more like a buyer warning, because if you know it up front, you can actually enjoy what the game is, instead of spending the first half annoyed that it isn't something else. Alright, let's talk about the Ryu issue properly, because this is one part of Ninja Gaiden 4 that can genuinely decide whether you recommend it or not. And I want to frame this the right way, because I'm not trying to turn it into rage bait. I'm trying to stop people from buying the game with the wrong expectations and then blaming the game for not matching the version they imagined. Here's a simple truth. If you grew up with Ninja Gaiden, especially the older entries, you associate the franchise identity with one name, and that is Ryu Hayabusa. He's the face, he's the legacy, he's the character people think of instantly when they hear Ninja Gaiden. So when the cover and the marketing give off the energy that Ryu is a major focus, it's natural for players to assume he's the protagonist, or at least equally central. But what Ninja Gaiden 4 actually delivers is a story and a progression that primarily follows Yakumo, with Ryu showing up later in the game, and in a more limited way that many people expected. That's the whole point, that's the gap. And if you go in expecting a full Ryu-led journey, you'll spend a lot of time waiting for the real game to start, instead of just enjoying the game you're actually playing. Now, here's why I still call this a solid game even with that issue. Because Yakumo's presence doesn't automatically ruin the Ninja Gaiden identity. The identity isn't only Ryu, the identity is the combat philosophy. The speed, the precision, the pressure, the punishment, and that feeling of earning mastery. And Ninja Gaiden 4 still delivers that classic experience in the gameplay. So the correct way to position this is Ninja Gaiden 4 is a strong action game that delivers classic Ninja Gaiden combat, but it may disappoint players who expected the narrative and progression to be built around Ryu as a main character or at least a secondary character. That's the buyer's warning. Now, if you're someone who cares mostly about gameplay, this warning won't matter that much. You'll probably accept Yakumo quickly because you're there for the fights and not for the story character focus. But if you care about franchise identity, if you care about that feeling of playing as Ryu across the full campaign, then this becomes a meaningful factor. And in that case, you'll want to approach Ninja Gaiden 4 with a specific mindset. Don't buy it as a Ryu's combat game. Buy it as a modern Ninja Gaiden action game where Ryu is present, but not the centerpiece. Because if you buy it with that expectation, the game becomes much more easier to enjoy for what it actually is. A return to classic action design in a genre that often goes too safe. Now, with that clarified, let's land the final verdict properly. Who should buy it today, who should wait, and who should skip it entirely? And I'll do it in a way that respects both types of fans, the combat first players and the Ryu first legacy fans. So where do I land on Ninja Gaiden 4 3 months after release? I land in a very specific place. As an action game, it's very solid, and as a Ninja Gaiden style combat experience, it delivers. The core combat is the real success here. It's fast, punishing, and satisfying in the way a good hack and slash game should be. It doesn't feel like it's trying to soften the experience to please everyone. It feels like it knows exactly what it is. A game that rewards discipline, timing, and control. And that alone is a big win, because we don't get many modern action games that are willing to be that unapologetic. But the recommendation depends entirely on why you're coming to Ninja Gaiden 4. If you're buying it primarily for the combat, then yes, it's worth it. Especially if you're someone who misses old school action design and you want something that demands more than casual button mashing. If you're a long-time Ninja Gaiden fan and you mainly want the franchise identity back in your life, you can still have a great time with this game. But you need the right expectation. Because if your expectation is that Ryu should be a main character or a secondary character in the story, the game is primarily Yakumo's story, and Ryu's involvement feels more like a limited size story than the marketing vibe might have led you to assume. That doesn't make the game bad, it just makes it a different kind of Ninja Gaiden 4 than many people expected. So here's the clean buy, wait, or skip breakdown. If you love tough action games, you like learning combat systems, and you want a modern game that feels like classic Ninja Gaiden in spirit, this is worth your time. If you're interested but you're hesitant because of the protagonist expectations, I would say wait for deeper discounts, especially if you're mainly buying it for Ryu and you're not sure how you'll feel about Yakumo being central. If you only want a Ryu-led Ninja Gaiden story experience from start to finish and you don't care about the combat unless Ryu is the focus, then this may not satisfy what you're looking for. My personal summary is simple. Ninja Gaiden 4 is a strong action game that returns to classic Ninja Gaiden combat, but is not the Ryu-centered combat many people assumed. If you buy it for the combat, you'll probably be happy. If you buy it for Ryu, you need to know what you're actually getting. If you've played Ninja Gaiden 4, let me know where you land. Does Yakumo work for you as the lead, or do you feel like the game needed Ryu front and center the entire time? And if you're a classic fan, what's your favorite Ninja Gaiden era? The NES originals, the modern entries, or something else? If you want more honest action game reviews, deep dives, and classic franchise coverage, please subscribe and hit that like button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.